Yes, thank you. And I just want to follow up just on a previous line of questioning. The mandatory training, Ms Bridger, that the graduate program participants do, when was that conducted again?
There was the specific session that I referenced, but I do believe they, as I said, did training with regards to the values of an APS officer and the like. Whether they did any specific work before, I think it was the 17th of April?
April, it was April.
If they did something specific before that, I would have to get that for you on notice. But
so when do you actually start? When do we actually onboard the graduate program? Are all 35 onboarded at once?
Largely, yes.
Yep. And when does that happen?
I think that's around February.
February? And we know that they got the mandatory respect at work training in April.
Yep.
The values of the APS, when would have that been
That would have
done?
been fairly early on in the piece. So it's sort of like, you know, welcome to the APS, here are our values, you know, that sort of stuff at the very start.
So, Mr Betts or Ms Bridger, when were you aware that this hot list existed, allegedly existed? When was that brought to your attention?
I think it was April, but I'll have to check that.
So, on the 30th of March, we were verbally notified that there was a rumour of a list.
Yep.
And then in May, we had some further verbal advice with regards to the list.
Yep.
And then we actually reached out and contacted the grad and had a chat with them in May around the allegation. And then on the 19th of May, we got a written complaint.
Yeah. It's usually more than one person part of a list. Anyway. Okay, so the mandatory respect at work training was undertaken by the grads after the allegations had been made. After
that was at the end of March, and then we ran the respect at work training in April.
And then
we will have done the APS values and stuff prior to that time.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Returning to the line of questioning we were going down, we were in Switzerland, weren't we? How many officials attended the lunch in Switzerland?
I think that's a communications outcome for the relevant committee.
And what about the Canberra Boathouse on the 20th of April? There was official dinner.
Was that the official dinner preceding the Infrastructure and Transport Senior Officials Committee?
Yes. Who from the Australian Government attended?
I will get a list for you, but it was myself. I was there with the relevant opposite numbers from all of the states and territories across Australia, and members of the Secretariat for the Infrastructure Senior Transport Officials and a number of senior departmental representatives, including the Deputy Secretary for Transport, Deputy Secretary for Infrastructure, First Assistant Secretary for Surface Transport.
And so what was the cost to the department of this event?
We'll check. I should just say this is part of a rotating thing where jurisdictions host these meetings. So some occasions we pay, some occasions, like one in Perth or one in Adelaide, the costs are met by the hosting jurisdiction on a rotating basis.
Yeah. So, Minister, there was a total of 13 departments.
They were the good old days, Ms Bridger.
Sorry?
Shadow Minister.
Oh, my apologies. I'll reword that.
Thank you.
There were 13 departmental staff at the event, 27 other Commonwealth Government officials and 5 non-Commonwealth attendees, and the total cost was $5,415.
Yep. Do you have a breakdown as to food versus alcohol?
No, my apologies.
Would you be able to with the invoice?
Yes, we could do that.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of the department didn't answer Quan 216. If it has been answered over the weekend, I apologise. How much departmental funding was spent on Welcome to Country and smoking ceremonies in 22-23?
Okay. Welcome to Country, which includes arts events, $26,551.95 for 22-23, and for and this year, financial year to the 31st of October. Within that figure of 26,500, it's just under 10,000 was arts-related events at various institutions.
Okay. Yep, for sure. I think Senator Canavan, did you have some questions?
Yep, I do. Thank you through you, Chair. Just turning to an FOI that was released, I believe, on Friday. I've got a number 23-302. The FOI is it's titled, the document's titled Measures Reconciliation 2023 Additional Estimates and 2023-24 Budget. There's a line item in that table that under the column Measure Mapping. It says delivering the referendum to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait peoples in the Constitution through a voice to Parliament. If I go along that, it over in the comments section says there's an amount of $475,000 that were in the contingency reserve from the October budget. Can I ask what was the $475,000 for?
I'll have to check that. Clearly, we didn't undertake any expenditure in the referendum, which is inconsistent with the stipulations put down. It may have been, again, in our communications function around...
Yeah, it might be. It's obviously...
I'll find out for you. I'll take it in good faith. I'll find out as soon as I can and come back to you.
Okay. No one has any...
Excuse me, Senator. Gillian Munro again. This was funding going to Old Parliament House.
Right.
They received the money. It related to them doing a piece of work, so it's probably better focused on them, but to recognise the democratic position
Civics.
of government.
I'm not familiar with all the agencies here. Is the Old Parliament House in your portfolio?
Part
of your culture?
Part of the arts.
It is the arts.
Right. Okay, so that's why it's in your departmental table.
Yeah, and
okay,
from memory, the program was around
other
civics and education associated with the way referenda work generically rather than anything else.
Okay, all right, okay. Be for them. Did any staff wear campaign T-shirts or material or badges during the...
No, we had a discussion about this last time, but there was no material was displayed to my knowledge, which indicated a preference one way or another in terms of the outcome of the referendum. People, particularly First Nation staff, may occasionally wear Aboriginal flags and that kind of stuff, but it was very clear that there should be no verbal or non-verbal cues suggesting a particular position being taken into the referendum.
Just not material I was talking about. So no staff staff weren't permitted to wear the official yes or no T-shirts or jumpers or anything like that.
You're correct.
To work. Okay. All right. Did you provide any information about the referendum to staff?
Yes.
Say last estimates.
Yeah, we did. We and the Public Service Commission and others repeatedly reminded staff of their obligations to remain impartial in terms of positions that they might take. In terms of internal communications, but also I communicated on a number of occasions the need for respect within the workplace, including for our First Nation staff, before and in the aftermath of the referendum.
Okay, all right. Could we on notice get a copy of that material that was provided?
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you. Senator McKenzie, happy for me to continue?
Yes, I just wanted to ask on the referendum. There is a letter sent by Minister McBain to all mayors providing advice about the referendum but neglected to provide any links or information about the No campaign. Can you confirm whether this letter was written by the department or not?
I can confirm that it was not written by the department.
Yes, you can. Yes, it was not written by the department.
It was not written by the department.
So the department didn't provide any advice to the minister around language or...
Correct. Well, advice provided informally or formally to the... So it's drafted in the minister's office. Let Hansard show. Mr McKay nodding vigorously.
Yes.
So how did the letter get dispatched?
Senator, David McKay, Deputy Secretary, Regions, Cities and Territories. I'll have the team for that part of the department this afternoon.
Yes, I appreciate that.
But as the Secretary has said, the letter was drafted within the Minister's office. We have a local government team within the department that distributed the letter from the local government email address on behalf of the Minister to local governments, but they had no other involvement in the preparation of the material.
Do you think it reflects on the department's... I mean, and Minister Betts, right? I know I've done it, Ms Bridger. Mr Betts rightfully said the department remained impartial throughout the recent referendum. But would you appreciate that that didn't look like it to the mayors?
Senator, yes. We have reflected on the work of that team in distributing that letter at the request of the Minister's office. We discussed it with the Public Service Commission, who advised that they didn't consider that any further action was required to be taken, but we did reflect on that with that particular team, that would have been a letter better distributed by the Minister's office rather than by the department.
And you could have provided them all your contact details.
Yeah,
that's correct.
And with hindsight, we should have done, and we learned that lesson.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was no other involvement of the team in the document.
And I appreciate the request would have been made, and it's a bit similar to other requests that are being made of your department by ministers, being directed by ministerial staff, for instance, on how you should or shouldn't, which questions you should or shouldn't answer from senators. Mr Betts, have you discussed with any of your ministers the need for a level of impartiality, a level of distance between ministerial staff directing your staff, and in this case, incorrectly?
Conversations took place when I first became Secretary about the importance of maintaining a strict separation between the public service and ministers' offices generally, and undertakings were given to me by ministers covering their staff and the conduct that they expected. I have to say that I have not had to have any difficult conversations with ministers' officers about inappropriate directions being given to the public service which crossed lines. And I think the reason why the distribution of Mr McBain's letter stands out is because it is very much the exception rather than the rule. We learned a lesson that day. At that point, the guidelines were still, if you like, at a relatively early stage of being distributed and understood within the public service. We immediately contacted the APSC because we feared we may have made a procedural misstep. We took advice from them, and there was no repetition of that. But this is very much the exception rather than the rule.
Just want to go to the department's relocation project. Can you please advise the details of the relocation project 2023 to 2027? How much was the contract for, and where will the department be relocating to?
Okay, I'm going to ask Ms Bridger to answer that. We are in negotiations at the moment with prospective landlords or prospective providers of accommodation, and those are commercial in confidence because obviously we want to get good value for taxpayers' money. But in terms of the general process, I'll ask Ms Bridger to tell you whatever she can about that consolidation project, as we call it.
Sure. The Secretary is correct. We are currently still in negotiations with the preferred tenderer and can't talk to specifics. We currently lease 44,000 plus or minus a bit more square metres of space across 4 locations here in Canberra, and we're hoping to move into a single building so it's much easier for us to basically collaborate and do our work.
So how much is the contract for that consultancy awarded to TSA management?
To TSA. I don't think I have the TSA figure here in front of me.
We can easily get you that information, provided
we'll
it's
get
not
that for
commercial
you,
finance.
Senator.
We'll give it to you.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be, no. Agree. I can't see what.
Because it is taxpayers' money after all. So you're planning to move all of your APS into the one location.
Canberra.
Is that the goal?
Just our Canberra.
Your Canberra?
Canberra located staff, yes.
So when did the Minister sign off on progressing with this contract?
I don't actually have that date here. I have a long list of many dates, but not that one.
So we'll
Is that a date you will be able to find?
Yeah.
I believe
Hang on,
so.
here's someone very helpful.
Assistant Secretary Sonia Bradley.
Do you have the price for the contract, please, Ms Bradley?
3.47 million.
Okay. And somewhere in Canberra?
Yes.
When are you relocating? When's the plan to relocate?
2026.
2026. When did the Minister sign off on progressing with the contract, please, Ms Bradley?
The contract was commenced on the 27th of January 2023.
Yep. And when did the Minister sign off on $3.5 million?
We'll need to take that one on notice.
We'll check. We'll see if we can find out for you. We'll come back to you. ASAP.
What's the estimated cost of the total relocation by 2026?
We only have the contract. We only have the contracting expense.
Has the Prime Minister approved this relocation plan?
There are formal processes for these approvals.
Yep.
Yes, I'm not sure if the Prime Minister has, but we're complying with all the process as per the Department of Finance, property guidelines, etc., and we're working closely with them through the process.
Yep. Thank you. And just, I think my final question in this area, I'm just wondering why...
We're planning on going to the Public Works Committee in October.
With an update or a seeking...
Later, actually, sorry, in a couple of weeks. Sorry, that's my apologies. This date is out.
I'm just wanting to understand on the org chart, Miss Houghton?
Yes, Ms Houghton.
Doesn't report to you, Ms Bridger. She reports directly to the Secretary, is that correct?
She reports jointly to myself and Ms Bridger. She's Chief People Officer, newly appointed. She sits on our executive leadership team, responsible for all things people and change management within the department. But obviously there is a big intersection with the corporate services transformation work which Ms Bridger is undertaking and leading. And so a joint reporting line is the way we've expressed that.
So does she report to you on certain things within her role and then Ms Bridger independently, not co-reporting?
Well, separately rather than independently, but yeah, she reports to me on people and change management, but that has a big segue into Marie's area, so we kind of work as a team.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Got one more quick one. Yep. Corporate. Just wanted to go through the net zero unit. How many staff are in the net zero unit at the moment?
Okay, so I've got FTE number for net zero unit. The figure I've got is 8.9 FTE.
I've got 8.9.
Thank you, Senator Ian Porter, First Assistant Secretary, Strategic Advisor, Net Zero, 8.9 FTE.
Right, okay. And where are your staff based, Mr Porter?
Of those, all but 2 are based in Canberra.
Okay.
I'm based in Melbourne and Canberra. 1 staff member is based in Brisbane.
Right, okay. So you're based in Melbourne and Canberra. How many do you come up to Canberra every week or every second week? What's the
1 week in 3 is the rule of thumb,
right,
but more as necessary.
And you fly here, I presume. Okay. have you done a calculation of what the carbon emission impact is of flying to Canberra once every month?
I haven't, but we've been assisting the department in our negotiations with the APS more broadly through the Department of Finance on establishing a full offset for
your
flights
emissions?
For flights more generally. We need to follow the APS rules.
Flights across the whole department, not just your flights?
Yep.
Okay, so but the net zero unit's not yet net zero. Okay.
Nice try.
And what's been the output so far from the net zero unit? You set up, about a year or so ago, wasn't it now?
It's November, last year.
Okay, so what's been the...
So I can frame that a bit. So there is work progressing across government on many aspects of the decarbonisation of the economy, including the importance of ensuring that steps are in place to enable structural adjustment to occur over the medium and long term as the economy decarbonises. As you'll be aware, the government has mandated the production of 6 sectoral plans across the economy, of which one is a decarbonisation roadmap for infrastructure and transport. The net zero unit plays an important role in terms of liaison, not least with Ms Purvis-Smith's group in transport, but more generally across government in pulling that roadmap together, but also with other jurisdictions, for instance, doing a lot of work with the New South Wales government around embedded carbon in infrastructure, and working with the Net Zero Authority to make sure that they have visibility of all the work that's underway. Might ask Mr Porter to take it from there, and Ms Purvis-Smith can chime in as well.
Thank you, Secretary. So, thank you, Senator. The largest piece of work the Net Zero unit is involved in is the Transport Sectoral Plan, or Transport and Infrastructure Net Zero Roadmap, as announced by the Minister after the budget. The intention is that will be available publicly towards the end of this year or early next year for consultation and review. It's in the assessment and design phase at the moment, so the unit has been reviewing transport emission reduction strategies worldwide, having a look at or working with our colleagues in transport and in infrastructure on what the best emissions or best and lowest cost emissions abatement opportunities might be, meeting with stakeholders external to the department and also across the Australian government, and as the Secretary indicated, working with states and territories on some advice back to the Infrastructure and Transport Ministers meeting later this year.
So that particular work, just focusing on that one, on the transport, is that paper, or this, whatever you're calling it, this report, roadmap, sorry, is that going to cover carbon emission standards for vehicles?
Work on fuel efficiency standards for vehicles is being led by Ms Purvis' team.
The roadmap provides a total picture across different modes of transport. Within that, fuel efficiency standards is a very important component. Yeah.
Okay, so the options for fuel efficiency standards or carbon emission standards, they'll be covered in this paper, will they?
Senator Marisa Purvis-Smith, Deputy Secretary of Transport Group. There are other pieces of work where progress is occurring on a more detailed level, and so fuel efficiency standards is being led in quite a detailed level separately, but it will be part of the roadmap, so that the roadmap on transport will include all of the some options that are already being progressed, some options, some things that might not be progressed. So not everything has to be progressed in the one unit out of net zero, and some things will have a track that's separate to the roadmap itself, but the roadmap will incorporate all of the material across the transport.
This is a bit of a... It seems like there's a lot of duplicated effort here, though, because you've got your own policy teams, presumably progressing things like carbon emission standard reductions and other issues relating to carbon emissions across other departments, and then you've got this other unit over here just doing separate reports. Why wouldn't all that work that the net zero unit's doing just be done by the normal policy people within a department?
Well, as we explained, we're talking about 8.9 staff in the net zero unit here.
Still,
well, there's a lot of work going on.
It's not your money.
We've talked about fuel efficiency standards. That applies to light vehicles. There are steps that we're taking to find a pathway for heavy vehicles, same in aviation, same in maritime. But there's also the broader infrastructure piece about, for instance, embedded carbon in land transport infrastructure, which we're working with the states and territories to find ways of measuring so that it can be taken into account in project business cases and investment decisions. And then there's the regional development component of structural adjustment with the economy, within the economy, making sure that communities aren't left behind as fossil fuel-based industries decline. That requires our regional development, the regional development component of our department, to be coordinated with other parts of government. So the net zero unit is a small unit, sits within the Office of the Secretary, adds value through the research and insight that it brings, but also directs the traffic and makes sure that the department has a coordinated approach within its organisation, but also more broadly across government.
Sorry, you go, Senator McKenzie.
No, well, just given we're in corporate, how much does the net zero unit cost the department?
So there was a figure in the budget which funded the net zero unit and its activities. From memory, it was 7 point something over 4 years, but I don't rely on that. We'll source that figure for you.
There's a Quan. I'm just checking, Senator. Thank you.
Just while that's happening, I just wanted to ask this. I just was reminded of something when you answered that, Mr. Betts. Is the net zero unit doing any work on the regional impacts of net zero?
That's what
Yes, so there is a net zero authority which is chaired by Greg Combate, which is...
Well, I'm particularly asking about the net zero unit, I suppose.
I know, but we talk to them. Okay. We provide information to them. We receive information from them.
So the net zero unit, if I can maybe just continue addressing the Secretary's comments, the unit is focused more on future policy developments. So we identify the next net zero policies that the department may undertake. A lot of programs, once they're identified, they move into line areas where technical expertise and existing regulatory and other systems can embed them. So we work across government. So we talk to the Net Zero Authority, we talk to our colleagues in the regional development part of the department, who also work very closely with the Net Zero Authority, whose role is to look at the impacts of the transition to net zero.
Can I just get an answer though? Are you doing any work on
impacts,
job losses and potential impacts of net zero policies?
Well, that's the role of the Net Zero Authority.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. So you're not doing that work. Okay, all right. And was there an answer on Senator McKenzie's question? No. The costs? She was asking about the costs, sorry.
So the previous one was 766,762 in the 2022-23 financial year, and I'll find the budget figure now.
Maybe that Ms Munro will have that figure.
So was that just for one financial year, the 7.7?
Senator, if I can give you those information. So in the 23-24 budget, there was the Reducing Transport Emissions measure, and one component of that related to the Net Zero Assessment Roadmap and Action Plan, and that was funding of $7.759 million across 4 years.
Okay. Mr Porter, before the election, I was hoping we were doing work within the department about the impact on regional communities and regional industries from a net zero position. So what is you said you talk to people in the regional development area, you talk and then you go and talk to Combay's crew. So what are your findings? What are the impacts?
So Combay's crew have only just started work. I don't really have there's not a specific answer in terms of findings, Senator, at the moment. We know that the impacts of both climate change itself and the response to climate change will be regionally felt and felt in urban centres as well.
Finally, there's an acknowledgement of that.
Oh, there is absolutely, Senator, an acknowledgement of that. And that's the work that the Net Zero Authority will do.
No, I appreciate the Net Zero Authority's doing that work. But you've just said they come to you for the expertise around transport, around all the other bits and bops you do in this department, and around regional development. So how often do you meet with the regional development people in the department, and what evidence are they providing you so you can feed into this work being done across government in an appropriate and evidence-based way?
So to break that question down into several bits, we meet with executives across the department on a fortnightly basis and more often as necessary. So we would see our colleagues in the regional areas at least that often.
We're looking, we're listening. Mr Porter, we're on limited time, and I know the Chair rightfully wants us to get on with it. I know you all chat a lot. What I'm really looking for, because I doubt it's happening, is the evidence and experience of the regional development impact of a net zero policy. What have you told the net zero whole of government? What information have you put forward other than it's going to hurt the regions?
Well, we have briefed them, for instance, on the very extensive range of regional programs which are available for investment to support economies in transition over the medium and long term, through our roads investment programs under the infrastructure investment pipeline, through regional precincts and partnerships programs, through various grants programs and so on, so that we can ensure that our resources appropriately take account of changes which are going to come in the economy anyway and are coming regardless of government policy. For instance, in the energy sector, the overall responsibility for energy policy it rests with a different department.
Correct.
Our role is to assist in making sure that people don't get left behind in that transition. And as Mr Porter said, as we seek to achieve Australia's international treaty obligations for net zero, we do that in a way which comes at the least cost to families and the least cost to communities.
Thank you, Mr Betts. That was a comprehensive response to my question.
Can I just, sorry, there have got some other questions that have come to me.
Porter.
Has there been a new Indigenous unit or branch established within the department?
Yes, there is. It's a group called First Nations Partnerships. It brings together some staff who are already working within the department, but I've augmented the resources of the department, now 7.8 full-time equivalent positions, including 2 or 3 senior executive positions, which we haven't had previously in the department. And a key focus there is the delivery of our various commitments under Closing the Gap, which was the agreement entered into by your government in 2017-2018. And we have 3 socio-economic targets for which we are accountable within the department around housing, around languages and around digital connectivity. And obviously all agencies in that Closing the Gap agreement, 3 tiers of government, 80 Indigenous peak organisations have responsibilities for instance, Priority Reform 3, which is making sure that we are equipped and competent as a department to engage constructively with First Nations communities. So we're now putting resources in place to ensure that we can do that effectively.
Are those 7.8 or rounding up to 8, are they 8 additional staff compared to...
No,
because it wasn't what confused there.
There are some additional staff within there, but there were some pre-existing positions which have now been moved into that. So we've got a focused group looking at Indigenous outcomes but working across the whole of the department. That's not the limit of our Indigenous employment, that's the starting point. As you know, there is a 5% target for Indigenous employment by 2030, I think. We're at 2.7% at this stage, so we have some way to go in terms of meeting our commitments to First Nations people. But
presumably not all those 8 are Indigenous, are they? Or?
Yeah, they are.
Or they have to be Indigenous, do they?
No, they are. But my understanding is that there are First Nations positions. They are filled by First Nations people. But clearly, I want, and I make no apology for saying that, we want and need First Nations people to be in leadership positions across our department, so that they bring the competence and the insight that comes from having the lived experience that they offer.
But what are they? I'm just wondering. You've got all these different units set up that sort of talking to people. Well, but they're not. Are they in charge of anything?
Yeah.
Like it's just coming back to this point about what I've taken away from this morning. Your employee expenses are going up. You're doing seemingly less. Well, we're building less infrastructure. Core parts of what the government what this department should do. And and there's a lot of groups being set up to talk about things and meet about things and communicate to others about things, but who's actually doing the work?
Okay, Senator, so your government in 2018 entered
Well,
into
it
the
wasn't
closing...
actually. Well, it was my government for a little bit, but half the time half the time I was actually in opposition. But go on. Sorry,
okay.
just Senator Bett.
Okay.
Sorry, Secretary.
Did a good thing.
Yeah, right.
You entered into the Closing the Gap.
I'm a senator.
Closing the Gap agreement, which I think most Australians...
I was
And you may have read the draft Productivity Commission report.
Chair. That wasn't my question. My question wasn't actually about Indigenous issues at all. It was about all the other units that are being set up in this department. Who's doing the Closing the Gap? Not talking about it, not talking to others. Who is going to be responsible for actually making sure those things work?
So our department, as I said, has 3 socio-economic targets to deliver. One relates to local infrastructure to support housing supply. That will be delivered principally by Deputy Secretary Mackay. That's his key accountability, working alongside and informed by the First Nations Partnerships Group. Digital connectivity is an important component of Closing the Gap. It's also an important component of the Central Australia Plan for Alice Springs and its environments. That will be delivered by my Deputy Secretary for Communications, supported by and informed by our First Nations Partnerships Group. And the socio-economic target around languages will be driven by the Deputy Secretary responsible for Arts and Creative Industries, Stephen Arnott, supported by the First Nations Partnerships Group. My view, and the view of the community organisations with which we engage, is that those socio-economic targets and the broader intent of Closing the Gap can only be met if we have strong First Nations leadership and representation within them. So there is activity there, there is action there, but I make no apology for strengthening First Nations representation in our leadership.
Okay.
Sorry, because you've had this department, and this issue existed long before your arrival, Mr. Betts, has had a reconciliation action plan for years, and the inability to actually lift the number of staff employed within the department who are from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background has been glacial. I understand you've added 5 new staff members?
Within that unit, yeah.
Within that unit. So across the department, I'd really appreciate understanding the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders employed.
Yep. And
the trajectory that that's going in. And then
Okay. 57 First Nations staff at the moment. Which
out of how many?
Out of
1,900?
Just under 2,000, so that's 2.7%.
Yep.
My intention, whilst I'm Secretary, is to achieve the 5% target which has been adopted by the government, and to exceed that target if possible, but I'm coming off an extraordinarily low base.
I appreciate that.
And I do think the Draft Productivity Commission report, which showed how little has been done since 2018 to deliver Closing the Gap targets, is a relevant reference point in this conversation.
Yeah. So how many of the graduates, the 35 young people that are in your graduate program, are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander?
I don't know the answer to that. There are multiple different programs and entry points for First Nations people into our department. I'd have to take it on notice how many of the grads identify as First Nations.
Thank you. No further questions.
Senator Mackenzie, I do have a couple of follow-ups to...
Have we got the harassment and bullying numbers yet?
No, but I do have the Canberra relocation estimate for you. So it's not yet been signed off by our Minister because we're still negotiating, and it will go through our Minister prior to going to the Minister for Finance before it goes to PwC, so we're sort of in the process. The total cost of that contract that you were interested in was $773,000. $7.73 million.
I was going to say, that's a bargain.
Yeah, it is a bargain.
Negotiated.
Yeah, as I was saying it, I knew I was like, it was not right. So that's around $290 per work point. With regards to the ITSOC dinner, you asked for the split of food and drink.
Yep.
Food 3895, drink was 1520, a total of 5415.
Work hard, play hard. I did want that harassment and bullying figure.
Yes.
And I can't believe with a HR department that it's now taken an hour and a half to locate it. You can tell me how much alcohol was consumed at the boathouse.
Because you asked for it.
Yes, but you cannot tell me how many harassment and bullying complaints have been made?
So we will get you that information. We've committed.
Thank you.
It would be the easiest thing in the world for me
Thank
is
you.
to take it on notice, right? But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and get it for you today, which
Thank
is what
you.
you asked for. So
I think this is a pleasant change of the way we've had Senate estimates for the last 10 years.
We're trying,
It's nice to have
Senator.
answers coming. I think it's fantastic.
It's a reformation.
We should encourage it. It's a shame the last 10 years were a flaming nightmare. Anyway, let's
You're in
move
government
on.
now, Chair. You can relax.
This is great now, isn't it?
It's all under
It's
control.
fantastic. Now we're back in the adults are in charge. It's nice. Anyway, let's move on. Are we completely finished in corporate? We are? Great. Okay. So, Mr. Betts, your corporate officers can run away.
you're free to go.